One. Shalom and welcome to another edition of Parsha Talk. I'm Rabbi Elliot Malamet in Highland Park, New Jersey, at the Highland Park Conservative Temple Congregation Anshe Emet. And joining me, my good friends, Rabbi Barry Chesler of Solomon Sheikh Day School, Long Island, Rabbi Jeremy Kalmanowski, Anshe Chesed, New York City. It is great to see you. We are at day 475. We share in the emotional elasticity of the last few days, the exaltation, I guess, joy at the release of the three young women hostages, but the anguish still that 93 of them are still in captivity, of which many of whom are not alive. So we pray that they will soon be released as well. We know that the weeks ahead are fraught with many, many complications and challenges. And it's something to witness. It's something to watch. I don't think that anybody who saw segments of these the release could in any way else respond without being filled with emotion. Bechi v'shirot, you know, tears and joy at the same time. In a sense, um, that is that's the experience of Israel at this point. This is what we're going through, tears and joy. We are talking about Parshat Vaera, the second parsha in the book of Shmot. Uh, we should talk about how it begins. Uh, Vayidaber Elohim el Moshe vayomer elav ani Adonai. I am God. Va'era el Avraham el Yitzchak ve'el Yaakov be'el Shaddai. I revealed myself to your ancestors one way, and here I'm going to reveal myself to you. I'm going to maintain my covenant with them, etc., etc. And we get a declaration here, which comes into Jewish life in liturgical ways as the four lishonot, the four terms of redemption, right? V'hotzeti, v'itzalti, v'ga'alti, v'lakachti. We could add v'heveti. And that text we've looked at also, but we just kind of orient ourselves to this is where they are. Moses tells this to the people. I love the line, V'lo shamu el Moshe mikotz haruach u'me'avodah kasha. There's a limit to theology, there's a limit to redemption. Do you want to just, give me your quick comment on Velo Shamu not listening? It's easier for pulpit rabbis to relate to Velo Shamu Albany.
But if they didn't listen to their leader, it's because of their own spiritual scantiness. Like the true meaning, of course, is I mean I'm kidding on this, but it's the Lo Shamuel Moshe Mikotze Ruach. Because if you were more spiritual, you'd understand what I was saying. But of course, what the text is saying is that slavery has beaten it out of them. Ibn Ezra has a comment. I don't think we spoke about it in our conversation last week, although this does appear in this as the introduction to the scene where Moshe goes out and kills the vicious taskmaster. He says we talk about this theme of Moshe being kind of Israelite and kind of Egyptian. Ibn Ezra writes that if he had just grown up in a slave house, he would not have had the kind of greatness of spirit that was necessary to do this job. If he had been growing up in a terrible small little slave hut and being abused by the Egyptians, where would he have gotten that kind of grandeur? And you could say and think about other kinds of liberation. They not to get all Marxist and stuff here, but they do come not from the oppressed classes. Martin Luther King was not from a poverty-stricken family and an oppressed class, and Gandhi was not from a poverty-stricken family and an oppressed class. And maybe that contributed to some of their educational experiences and social experiences, contributed to the grandeur that they had within them to lead something better.
Right. So the Kotzer Ruach ve'avodah kasha is it's not smallness. It's just, I think I relate to it comically in the sense that, I don't have today we would say I don't have the bandwidth for this. I just don't have the capacity. I don't have the emotional capacity to deal with anything beyond what's in front of me, and what's in front of me now is my suffering, my pain, my suffering, my anguish, um, and to a certain extent that reflects I think, a certain kind of truth, which is when you are suffering, there's not much more you can pay attention to, right? And even to the point of God, in being in visiting with the sick sometimes, and you bring comfort to people. People will welcome comfort, but what is this a comfort message or a redemptive message? And to what extent people open to comfort and not open to redemption? Maybe. Or
So I don't know that they're even open for comfort here. So, while you're talking, I'm thinking, how can we translate Kotzer Ruach? And perhaps one way to look at it is kind of an abridged spirit, that their spirit has been crushed or cut, and they don't have a lot of wherewithal. They've grown up as slaves. Their parents have grown up as slaves. Their grandparents have grown up as slaves. So there's not really anyone, or maybe a few, if we accept the rabbis reading, who knew what it was like to be free. And so when Moses comes with his message, how can it be received well?
right.
It's hard to believe it's the first time they heard such a message.
Yeah, as you talk, I'm thinking like, okay, I haven't been immersed in the California story. Here are a bunch of people that are thousands and thousands of people have no homes, and they have to find a place to live, and um, yeah, of course they would want someone to comfort them and just maybe distract them, but they have things that are more pressing immediately on their minds, right? And it just reminds me, I don't want to be too condescending here, but after 9/11, we had many people, you know, there were people who went down to downtown New York, and chaplains. They were like emergency chaplains, and I'm like, really? They were, you know, in front of this massive catastrophe, we're going to sit and have a theological conversation now. And that's the way I've always related to this story, which is the there's a time for hearing and a time for just be with me. And I think, if you want to be critical about Moses, here Moses is being told this to tell the people, and it's all off key. It's just not. It's not where
Well, what makes it off key? Why is Moses off? Is he right? He was chosen against his will from last week,
right.
and he's put in an extraordinarily difficult situation, right? At the end of last week, first time he appears before Pharaoh, he makes the situation worse.
Well, so then the question is that do they
So
really
now
be
God pulls out all his cards, and it's striking, the two verses you read, there are three different names for God. That
yeah,
in and of itself is a little confusing.
indeed,
Elohim,
indeed.
Adonai, and El Shaddai.
Maybe
So
it's
who is this God that all of a sudden is coming to take us out of Egypt?
the project is so abstract to them that they can't even hear it. They can't even wrap their minds around it. And that's, I mean, there is an education going on here for Moses. He's got to know how to reach them. Often I like to, when I'm reading this passage, I'm thinking like, when do they listen to him? When they listen to him next week. They listen to him when they tell him when
When they
this
told
is
to get
what you
up
need
and
to
go?
do. Slaughter your lamb, put the blood in the doorpost. Give me things to do. Don't give me theology right now. There's something to be said for it. But let's go on because we got a whole little passage here that's a genealogy. That's very important. But I want to try to talk about the beginning. It's like the overture to the plagues, the beginning passage, chapter 7, okay? Where after Moses has complained that he can't speak, he's Ariel Svatayim, I'm no good, Lo Shamu, they're not going to listen to me. Um,
He
how
didn't have freshman homiletics.
right? How is Pharaoh going to listen to me? And that's a statement that repeats itself. Henani aral svatayim mechishma elai Faro. Okay, so God's answer to that is, Netatika Elohim leFaro. I'm going to make you the Elohim to Pharaoh. And Aaron, your brother, will be your Navi. What a great line, okay? He's going to be your spokesman. So already we're constructing here a partnership, okay? Ata tedaber, you will speak everything that I command you. And he'll speak to Pharaoh. V'shilach et bnei Yisrael me'aretzo, and he will send the people out from his land.
That
V'aniakshet
doesn't really,
leFaro.
that doesn't quite happen because for all of his complaining about this, Moshe does speak quite a bit.
He does. It's the most ironic line in the whole Torah because by the end of the Torah, he's can't.
Right, but I think partly it's ironic because we lose sight about what it says about God. And what it says about God is that God is intended to be the silent partner. The human being has to speak for God,
Okay.
right? So Moses gives up his human role in a sense to become the divine role, and he leaves Aaron to do all the talking.
Okay. All right. So go down to the end of that little paragraph. V'yadu Mitzrayim keni Adonai. Egypt will know that I'm God. Bintoti et yadi al Mitzrayim, as I spread my hand over Egypt. V'hotzeti bnei Yisrael mitucham, and take Israel out of their midst. Vayas Moshe ve'Aaron kasher tiva Adonai otam kenasu, and that's what they did. So in a way, this paragraph is like, he said they're going to do it. They did it. It hasn't been done yet, but this is like the intro to the story. Moshe, and we get this little, proof, little P.S. Moshe ben Shmonim Shana. Moses is 80 years old. Aaron ben Shalosh Ushmonim Shana. And Aaron was 83 years old. B'dabram el Paro, when he speak to Pharaoh. And I said to both of you earlier, this is interesting. He's 80 and Aaron is 83. This is interesting that the Torah has to tell us that it gives us an age stamp on the two of them.
Right, but you can imagine an ancient scribe having this verse. He has to put it in somewhere, and he can't quite figure it out, so he throws it in here.
Okay, fine. So you make the process editorial comment. I want to make the kind of, what does this add to human knowledge argument, and how can we interpret this? And Barry, would you please repeat your response to how do we interpret this?
I don't even remember what I said.
You
It
said
doesn't lend
no,
itself to
it said 80,
interpretation.
he's 80 and 83. There's not much there. And I said, there's a lot there. There's a lot there. And this is so we have a story here in the age stamp of the two brothers, because it's this is the first time that two brothers are getting along, really, in a way that they share a project. And there's an age disparity. The younger one is obviously the more authoritative one, but the older one has authority too. And this is not a constitutional separation of powers. However, you do have Moshe ending up being the political prophet leader, and you have Aaron being the ecclesiastical leader, the priestly leader.
I would say it is an almost constitutional um, separation of powers. First of all, as we talked before we started recording, we have a little smile of two competing leaders, both around 80, and you got to choose one of them
Okay.
here in the United States. But it is constitutional insofar as Aaron is the ecclesiastical leader and is the ritual leader. Aaron will, among other things, give Birkat HaKohanim, and it is a halacha that you cannot recite Birkat HaKohanim if you have killed somebody. And in modern times, we've had to answer, halachically speaking, some new questions, like almost everybody in Israel has served in the wars, and so lots and lots of Kohanim have in fact killed people, but we're not criticizing them for that. That's their duty. Lots of people have had car accidents, and
Important.
does that
You need
mean
both
they're
of this. Yeah.
unfit? The Israeli poskim, the Israeli halachic authorities have tended to say that that if you killed somebody in the course of your IDF service, that doesn't count, and you can still say Birkat HaKohanim. Rav Soloveitchik said the opposite, actually, here in America. Said, no, no, it means that you have to be a non-death person. You have to be a life person. Well, why do I say this? Moshe has some blood on his hands. And even though in the 1 week of the dedication of the temple before Aharon and his sons are dedicated by Yom HaShemini on the eighth day, Moshe does serve as a kind of Kohen Gadol in the dedication of the temple, but he's got blood on his hands. He's killed the Egyptian taskmaster. Uh, he kills the people after the golden calf, along with the Levites. Presumably, some of those people got residually removed from their Kohanic duties. But Aaron is a peace man, and Moshe is the difficult decisions man. Aaron, as the Gemara will say, Aaron is the guy who would tell white lies to make peace between people, and Moshe is the guy who says, Yikov hadin et hahar, let the law pierce the mountain, let the chips fall where they may. And so I do think that each of them has a different kind of personal worldview association thing that renders them fit for some things and unfit for other things.
Right. And so what we're getting told here is that we are establishing a partnership. That whole paragraph basically is, well, what are the lines of authority? What's the line of power? How are we going to be separating your powers here? You're the two of you are going to lead together. Obviously, Moses is going to be the one that is in direct contact with me, with God. Uh, but I'm going to present Moses to Pharaoh, and Aaron will be your spokesman. Um, it just creates a different kind of dynamic. And so this little detail is part of I think the Torah is trying to tell us something valuable here, that that the leading of Israel out of the desert, out of Egypt, is is not a one-man show.
But I don't know what the age, like it didn't say, it didn't say, and Moses had curly hair and Aaron had straight hair, and it doesn't say, Moses had freckles and Aaron was chubby. What's the
So here, I'll give you
Well,
my
I
take.
think
age?
that what Aaron is the genealogical heir, and that is what the priesthood becomes, right? It becomes vested in the family tradition, and that really is the foundation of biblical religion, right? The one thing we cannot imagine biblical religion without is the temple. We can't imagine it without Moshe to an extent, right? Because Moshe's impact from the Bible's point of view, in a sense, kind of disappears through the rest of the Torah, the rest of the Bible, right? He's not the strong presence. The priests are, and the kings are, and we could say perhaps the prophets are, but what's striking is that Moses' family also disappears.
That is quite true.
Yeah, okay. So then you also are saying, look, without Moses, we don't have a story, right?
We
And
don't have this story,
we
right?
don't
We
have
don't
this.
have the Torah story, but we do have the post-Torah religion without Moses,
We don't
because
have a
there's
Torah
very
without.
little reference to him, right? Once you get past the introduction to Joshua, he's not going to appear that much.
Yeah, but we don't have a Torah without Moses. We don't have Mount Sinai without Moses, and so the
Right, but we
prophets
don't
talk
have
about.
Mount Sinai and Chronicles, if I remember correctly. And the Torah really becomes important very late, relatively speaking. It's not, if we discard for a moment the rabbinic myth, it's not passed down from generation to generation. It's going to emerge much later. And, depending on what version of modern biblical scholarship you follow, it probably emerges as a work of the exile, or certainly the late First Temple period. It's not part of the bread and butter of biblical history. And I think that's an important piece because, what's the other thing that we know about brothers? Is that the younger brother is the one who's the hero generally.
And here too. Yeah.
But, well, except I think Aaron is a hero in his own right. And when we remember, again, from a modern critical perspective, that most of the Torah is a priestly document, not a prophetic document. It really is, it belongs to Aaron in a very real sense, I think.
Okay, so this is going to lead into the plagues, and I have a couple of things just to base the plague narratives. Many of the plagues are done by Aaron. Many of them are done by Moses. I mean, we can spend a lot of time charting out, how the plagues themselves are organized on the basis of whose staff does this plague, um, who says what to make this plague happen, etc. They're both involved in some way through the plagues. I guess I'm going to ask the kind of rabbinic, question from the perspective of our our familiarity with the story and our lack of familiarity with the story. We encounter the story liturgically, um, as people who attend a seder. Okay. Um, and we tend not to encounter the story literarily. I mean, if unless you go to shul and read, closely, what I'm trying to say is it's a difficult text. These are difficult texts to read and to figure out. There's a lot of information, a lot of organization, a lot of terms here, there's a lot of things packed into the text of the plagues. And I find every year when we get to this, these Parshiot, Vaera and Bo, it's like, how am I supposed to encounter, what does the Torah want me to take away from this? I know what the Seder wants me to take away.
Well, what does the Seder want us to take away?
There you go. So what does the Seder want? The Seder wants to say that God made these things happen, and because of the weight of these plagues, Pharaoh succumbed and released the people from Egypt.
And but what's striking when we're at the Seder and we're the most famous mention of the plagues is when we dip our finger into the wine or grape juice and spill it for each plague. And in the sense that it makes it seem that the plagues are happening one after the other. Right? The
Right.
narrative story in Exodus is that maybe it takes a year for all of them to unfold.
So isn't that
So
interesting?
what's missing is the drama,
Yes.
right? When we read the Torah, as opposed to sitting at a Seder, we're supposed to experience some kind of dramatic tension. That these plagues are not following chick-chock one after the other, that there's some kind of lull in between when people are trying to figure out for themselves whether they're Israelite or Egyptian, what's coming next. And it's not so easy to do.
Right. And
And
I would
then the hammer falls again.
I would ask the question in another way, which is, why is it that when we sit down and tell the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim, we don't read Exodus chapter 1 to 15. We actually we don't even we read a body of text that's 4 or 5 chapters, the plagues, in one sentence, and the Haggadah is really trying to say, I'm going to shape this part of the narrative in as one piece because it's not the whole part of the narrative.
Because one of the things that I think is more true in the Torah than certainly in the Haggadah. I mean, the Haggadah is, if we think that we're supposed to l'saper sipur yitzias Mitzrayim, that's not exactly the description of what's going on in the Haggadah. It's discussing ritual actions which express a religious point. But the literary quality in these chapters in the Torah, um, I think that one of the things that really vanishes by the time we get to the Haggadah, but is very present in this, I'll call Elohei Mitzrayim es Shvatim. I'm going to make judgment against all the gods of Egypt. This is Pharaoh starts off being, Li Oriani Sitini is in Ezekiel. This is my river. I created myself. I am the crocodile of the Nile. And we have the sun god and we have the Nile god. And we are the most powerful nation. And we have really incomparable fertility thanks to this river. And, the great sort of divine figure of the king of Egypt. And he needs to be taught a lesson. And the true God vanquishes the false gods, and each of these plagues is aimed at, or the sun is blacked out, or the river is turned to blood, or all the crops are destroyed. I think that one of the vectors that makes the literary part so powerful, as we read it in Shul, is the destruction of the order that makes Egypt so powerful.
And
And that,
that's how you see the plagues then,
That's how I see the plagues.
as undermining that order in a
well,
sequential form.
Dissolving, literally dissolving it in blood. There's a midah keneged midah. You threw the babies in the river. We're we're turning your river to blood. Um, and yeah, I think that's one of
so
the
I'm
major things
I
going
just
on.
happen to have this book in front of me, and he's got, this is William Prubb. He's got several themes with which to look at it. You're the anti-creation theme, which is kind of what you're talking, humanity and nature, which is like the flood, or the tall tale, which is, he says, one of the outstanding features of the Exodus story, beginning already in chapter 5, is it's not one remained, not one was smitten, not a hoof, not a house, not an animal. It's like everything. It's a big story, and you know, I think there's so many entry points here. It's really difficult to say it's really about one thing. I mean, that's it's a great theme,
I
but
would disagree with you for this reason.
okay.
So we don't have in the story, except for perhaps Parshat Bikurim and Kitavo, any story of the Exodus, right? What we have is the Exodus itself, but the Exodus itself, as it's couched in the book of Exodus, is to lead to the Mishkan, right? The story is not a story of redemption. We're now free. It's a story that we can now build a place on earth where God can dwell.
So this is where you and I will disagree, because I think
Well, you
even
could confess you're wrong.
even in a verse like I said, this is a story. There are people here. There's Moses, Aaron, Pharaoh. There's the people of Israel. There's Egyptians. There is the land of Egypt. There's the land of Israel out in the imagination, and there's God.
So
There's
where does your story end?
My story ends, when they exit. Okay, that's the Exodus story.
In chapter 13,
It ends with the splitting of the sea. It's
in
the
chapter 15.
right.
I was just sure. But the book is not even half over yet.
Exactly.
Right? That's not the story of Sefer Shemot. The
I'm
book
saying
that's called Exodus does not tell the story of the Exodus. It tells the Exodus as a prelude to something else.
the
I think that this is I'm going to first of all, it's obviously a tremendously rich story. There's a lot of value, and the uh, main way that the Torah in general wants the individuals to absorb the story is, Zacharta Kievet Hayita Be'eretz Mitzrayim. You have to remember and take a moral point from that. But I'm going to go with Barry on this and note that this is exactly what Nachmanides says too, is that the point of exile is that they had fallen from the level of their ancestors. Abraham talked to God all the time. And the point of the Exodus is to recreate the conditions for a relationship between God and the people that replicates, what the ancestors had. And that does mean the house of worship. So it's
it's
hard
two
to
to one
disagree with
here.
it.
So I'm gonna just make a last ditch effort for the case here, which is, this is about shaping an imagination, and the plague narratives is to educate Egypt that there's God, to educate Pharaoh, Laman Teda, over and over again, so you shall know, so you shall know. And then when it comes to the plague of Barad, which is the seventh plague, which we didn't talk about, but it's the way that the Parsha ends in this, it concludes it. And then after that, once we get to next week, remember we'll start off next week with this, when it says, the man tisaper bo'oznei, I'm reading from Parshat Bo. The man tisaper bo'oznei bincha uven bincha et asher italalti b'Mitzrayim. In other words, the plague narrative shifts from, this is going to teach Pharaoh something, to this is going to teach you something, and that you are going to tell a story. Now, I'm relating to this as a storyteller who if I were to sit with a child or a congregant or a listener or an audience and say, the Nile turned to blood and the frogs came out of the Nile and we were stricken with lice. And here, so I can understand that in the storytelling quality of all of these plagues, that there's something very rich going on here. And it wants to captivate us for this reason. And it's almost like saying we are so overwhelmed by these manifestations of divine power. What are we going to do with that? And we
Right, but redemption doesn't come until they can sing on the other side of the sea.
right. I
Right,
well,
and
I
that'll be in 2 weeks.
you know, you're speaking from within the rabbinic tradition, who has taken all of that and reduced it into one sentence. Like, I mean, the Haggadah
No,
is
I don't think it's, in other words, I think where we might disagree is what we mean when we say story.
yeah.
So what you're talking about is certainly a kind of a narrative, but its purpose is not quite, I don't think, the way you made it out to be.
Well,
Because even in the context of the Torah, the purpose of the plagues is really to get to the other side of the sea. Because the great miracle, and I don't think it's just for the rabbis, I think it's embedded in biblical traditions as well, is not the plagues, it's the crossing of the sea.
all right. So Barry, you were saying the purpose of the plagues is to get moving. Jeremy, purpose of the plagues.
Well, if I have to pick one, I'm going to say, the Pharaoh has to learn who the real power is. Pharaoh's illusory, idolatrous order has to be defeated.
I'm going to say to
Completely.
amaze everyone, Pharaoh, and also to create in the imagination of Israel for forever the idea of a powerful God, and so that we can
Okay. So you make your case quite eloquently, but there's one question left for you to answer.
go ahead.
Did it work?
We're still working at it. That's the point.
Or is what crystallized the story actually the exile? That the experience of the free people in the land is what didn't work. That we do better as Jews up until the modern period, let's say, in exile than we do in the land.
I'll just say it like this because it's so much more fun to tell the story of the 10 plagues at the Seder than it is to tell the story of the Korban Pesach. Okay. That is to say, I think if I wanted to
Just flesh that out. Explain why that
if I
is.
want to captivate an audience, I'm going to talk about wonder. I'm going to talk about hail coming from the sky. I'm going to talk about wild animals and terror and terrifying things and power, right? I'm not going to say we gathered in our home and slaughtered a lamb.
No, because but
Actually,
you're
it is.
missing the central question, which is when do we eat? And that's what the
I
Korban Pesach is
know.
for.
No, this is really true, actually, because Rabban Gamliel did not say Kol shelo mana et eser hamakot lo yetla
Good,
yedei
right?
tova. Rabban Gamliel did not say anyone who does not enumerate the 10 plagues does not fulfill his obligation. He said anybody who has not discussed the symbolic foods.
Exactly.
So, because the Haggadah is not about the biblical story. The Haggadah is about the ritual commemoration
That's the
through the
point.
symbolic foods.
That's the point. The point. And so that's where I'm having difficulty because I want to be so rooted in the story. I want to like my whole strategy of reading the text is like be inside the verse. Be inside when it says Moses is 80 and Aaron is 83, I'm going like, what does that mean? Right?
Well, who are you, Moses or Aaron?
I'm both, right? So I
You're
actually both.
163.
I'm the younger. I'm a youngest. So I what does it mean to have a big sibling, a big brother, or and that kind of, dynamic and what does it mean to, you know, I'm a rabbi, I have a chazan, lovely, Mike Weiss, lovely chazan. It's a psychodrama that goes on between a rabbi and a chazan. We have a good repartee, and it's a wonderful relationship. I do the sermon, he does the singing. it's pretty clear that there we have a divide, their roles are divided, and the texture of the shul is enhanced by that. I would say lahavdil, the texture of the leadership of Israel is enhanced by the fact that there are carved domains between Moses and Aaron, right? And how that relates. So the story is not about, I mean, we're telling it with, Pesach Matzah Maror, but it's about people and power and plagues and God fearing and lots of weird things that happen. Okay. We've gone over, but we thank our listeners, our viewers for watching and commenting. And we have so many people that I know enjoy this. They wait for it. I got someone asked me, when is it coming up? I want to see it. And so we thank you for that. We're very touched by that. And looking forward to more emotion and lots of hope for the remaining.
Yerbu.
And that's it. We want to thank you and wish you good Shabbos. And thanks for watching Parsha Talk. See you.
Shabbat shalom.
Bye bye.